Today, I am super excited to welcome to New York and to the studio, Kristy Grant-Hart, the Managing Director of Spark Compliance Consulting. And today, Kristy, we're going to talk a little bit about your book, How to Be a Wildly Effective Compliance Officer.
Thank you.
Which I had the opportunity to read, and thank you for the autographed copy. Appreciate it.
Anytime, of course.
It was a wonderful book.
Thank you.
And before talking about it, why don't you share with us a little bit about how a nice girl like you got into a field like this?
A nice girl like me. I'm not so sure that everyone would agree with that. So actually, I started in film and television, believe it or not. I began my career out of film school at UCLA in Hollywood. Decided that that wasn't for me long term and became a lawyer.
You moved a little bit away.
Just a little bit different, slightly. And I was hired by Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher in Los Angeles. My first big case was actually the Siemens corporate monitorship, which at the time was the biggest bribery investigation the biggest bribery monitorship. And so that took me to Mexico, working on Germany, Argentina, all in this anti-bribery corporate monitorship world. After a couple of years, I was sent to London to work on the LIBOR investigation, where I went in-house afterward. I married a Brit and stayed in London and became the Director of Compliance for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa at Carlson Wagonly Travel, then the Chief Compliance Officer at United International Pictures, which is the joint distribution company of Paramount and Universal Pictures. So all the way back into film again.
So you got your Hollywood back.
Came right back full circle. And then I wrote my book as I was doing enormous amounts of travel in that job, all over the world, training in 43 countries, I think, on 5 continents by the end of that. And then the book was published. So that's my background.
Wonderful. So you really do have a frontline view of a lot of these
issues.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So a couple of questions. So you talk about compliance officers being one of the gang, okay, and how that can be incredibly challenging. So when I read that, I thought of, a parent saying, to one of my kids, hey, I'm not your friend, I'm your father, right? Does a compliance officer need to be one of the gang?
Yes, a compliance officer does need to be one of the gang because you're not a parent. You're a little bit more the friendly police officer or the principal, but you aren't at a different level. With the parent and child, there's a very clear separation of power. Compliance officers is not a separation of power. It's knowing the rules and helping people to follow them, which is slightly different. And to be effective, you really need the buy-in of the people around you. And in my experience, the best way to do that is to make them feel like you're one of them, that you are not some strange alien creature from Planet Compliance, but that you're actually, you live in their same space, you care about their sales goals, you care about the business being profitable, you are somebody who is proud of whatever the business is doing and understand it.
Sure.
So if you don't get there, you can't be as effective as you should be.
So it reminds me a little bit of a statement that a CEO of a major aerospace company said, not the CCO, the CEO. He said, the challenge of a compliance officer is how to inspire people who are outside your organizational perimeter, but yet who are on your team.
Yeah, and getting them on your team to feel like they're on team compliance and I'm on team sales, I'm on team procurement, I'm on team HR. We don't want fights, we don't want turf wars. We want to be part of the same organism that is, creating opportunity for all of us. And I'm here as compliance to support and help you do that. And when they have that as an understanding, really, it changes the conversation.
Sounds a little bit like I often share to commercial teams. The compliance team is not your bonus prevention team.
Right.
They are your support team. Because guess what? They want you successful, but they also want you safe and they want you back home.
My very favorite definition of compliance is the group that protects the company in 5 years.
Right.
So we're not looking at your quarter, we're not looking at your week, we're not looking at your profit warning. We're looking at what this company is going to be in 5 years, protecting it from fines, protecting it from layoffs as much as possible, protecting it from reputational damage. So my job is actually to do what you want. We want to do this together. We all want this company to succeed. Let me help you.
Right. So you make it very personal as well.
It has to be. Yeah. Everything is personal. If it's not personal, you're not doing it correctly.
Interesting. So moving on a little bit, and I think this speaks to the same issue, is you talk about in your chapter plugging into the power sources. You talk about identifying the power sources, and you talk about named power versus covert power. What is that?
Well, named power is named. I am the CEO.
Right.
I am the CFO. I am the country manager. It is a defined term of someone in power. But frequently, the more powerful people are not named. They're the influencers.
Okay.
So they're the most popular person on the sales team, or they're the person who's been there longest, and everyone waits to talk until Barry has said what he thinks, right? Because Barry is the one who really has the power, not the person who's ostensibly in charge. So when you're looking at organizations, you need to not just look for who appears to have the power, but who actually has influence and persuasion. Because ultimately, my book is about motivation, persuasion, and influence. And what you want to try to do is really genuinely try to make friends, or try to at least gain the understanding of the people with the covert power as well as the named people. Because tone from the top is all well and good and extremely important. Without that, you're in real trouble. But the people who are going to filter your message and get it to the rest of the organization are the influencers, and they don't necessarily have the title.
Is that part of what I heard one chief compliance officer talk about, where she said, I try to get people on the commercial workforce to feel like they're compliance ambassadors?
I love that.
Is that a little bit?
Ambassadors, champions, believers, whatever you can, evangelists, whatever you can do to get the people who believe to talk about it, and to make it, for lack of a better word, cool to be on team compliance. Like, compliance is generally not a very cool place. But as much as you can to make it not seem like something you don't want to be associated with, but instead to make it so normative to be on team compliance that it's weird not to be. That's what you're trying to get to.
And do you think that helps companies get to where our stated values are the same as our operational values?
That's what you're looking for, that congruence, right?
Right.
And if you don't have people quietly saying this is what we do and how we do it, and looking at people who are not doing it that way and saying, hey, cut it out. Like, this is not how we do things here, and meaning it. That's where you're trying to get to. You're trying to get to that congruence of stated values and actual behavior.
So for a compliance officer that might be watching this that says, okay, where do I find the covert power pockets?
Right. Listen to who people listen to.
Okay.
If you have a canteen, or if you have public meetings or public halls, who talks? Who speaks up? Who do people wait to hear what they have to say before other people will state their opinion? There are always social dynamics where someone has the most influence. And the more that you can pay attention to where that is, where you can hear it, where you can see it, when you're looking for it, you'll start to see it naturally. People have codes of behavior, and you can tell when people are powerful.
Right.
Look for them and try to make friends with them, probably not in a big public way, maybe much more effective in a quiet way where you find your commonalities. So maybe you both have kids or dogs, or you both like to vacation in the same place, or both have sick parents. There are so many ways that people have individual commonalities that aren't related to work. And when you can find one of those and get that relationship started, it gives you the sort of in to create a bigger, broader relationship that then starts to talk about how you can help them in their job.
Reminds me a little bit about the book where you say, just look for the artifacts on someone's desk, the photographs, the souvenirs, and
the knickknacks, the weird pictures, the calendar with the goat in a tree.
Right.
And you're like, why do you have a goat in a tree? Oh, I went to Africa. And that kind of stuff it's begging for conversation. People's individualistic thing that they either talk about or that shows their personality, use that as your entree to start having a real relationship, and it makes all the difference in the world.
Do you think that impacts people's ability to say, you know what, I want to talk to Kristy about this issue?
Oh, I think it's everything.
Yeah.
So I had a rule when I was chief compliance officer. Anytime someone came to talk to me, I shut the door.
Right.
And that was partially because I never wanted someone to say, oh, she shut the door. Who's in there with her?
Right.
I wanted it to always be an environment where people felt like they could talk to me.
Sure.
And so I purposefully left a map of the globe on my office, up in my office, because people would come and say, oh, where are you going next? Or I had pictures of my dogs and my husband in my office. And those things just allowed conversation to simply be easier.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So you talk, and I think, again, we're sort of talking in the same subject here, where you talk about in your book, your job is to become a trusted advisor and friend to the business, and don't underestimate the power of the mundane water cooler conversations. If you don't ever participate in conversations about the latest movie, TV shows, or holidays, you are robbing yourself of a major business advantage. Kristy, is this happening?
I think too often it doesn't.
Okay.
I think compliance can be a very lonely role. And it can sometimes feel uncomfortable to go out and even try to start talking to a group because it's that thing like, oh gosh, I don't want to talk compliance in here.
Come.
You know,
Right.
like what? Immediate distrust, right? But the more that you go out there and say, so, did you see that game over the weekend?
Sure.
Love those Steelers, Cowboys, whatever, Manchester United. The more that you can begin to be someone the general population associates with, the easier it is for you not to be compliance,
Right.
but you're Kristy or you're Richard. And then when I have a problem, it's so much easier for me to come talk to you because you're not compliance.
Right.
You're Kristy, you're Richard. You like that same sports team I do, or I rib you because you don't.
Sure.
Now I can come talk to you when things are difficult. Whereas if you're Ivory Tower, you're out there by yourself, you don't engage, it's much harder to be seen as a person, and people like talking to people, not titles.
So given that, in some sectors we're under some harsh market conditions right now, budgets are getting cut, travel's getting cut. So for a compliance officer and a team that has less resources to be at the water cooler in Dubai or in Singapore, can they still make that happen without being forward-based?
I mean, it's harder. There's nothing like travel, but there's nothing like being on the ground and meeting people. And without a doubt, I think that, to me, is always the hallmark of whether you have a really strong compliance program is, do you invest in travel so people can see and meet? That being said, I do understand that that's not always possible. When it's not, you continue to see if you can't engage with people on a local level as a person.
Right.
Whether it's putting your picture in some of your emails or seeing how compliance can have videos maybe on the intranet or Yammer site, making yourself invested in, say, responsible business initiatives or the charitable giving or whatever it is that you can plug yourself in as a person, the more you're relatable so you're not just compliance.
What about showing your vulnerability? In other words, saying, hey, we're rolling out this program. If this doesn't make sense to the work you do, would you just talk to me about it? Because even if I'm upset by what you share, if you attack my program, I can fix what I know. So let me help you.
Yeah, there's enormous power in vulnerability. Brene Brown has made a career of talking about the power of vulnerability because when you let people know that not everything is okay all the time and that sometimes this is really hard, you're immediately relatable. And I think one of the biggest challenges of being in compliance, or I'm a lawyer as well, is this sense that we have to know everything and do everything correctly and always, I'm perfect. It's like, well, we're not. I'm not. You're not. We're not perfect.
Right.
And actually, that kind of vulnerability and not always being sure and being willing to say, I'm not sure, let me find out, or you know what, I just don't feel very good today. Yeah. I'll get back to you tomorrow, makes you so much more human. And we're afraid to be vulnerable, but our vulnerability allows other people to be human with us, and that's how we start conversations.
I think that's huge, Kristy, because speaking as I'm not the union rep for former salespeople,
right?
But there's a strong type A DNA out there that's, no one knows better about what goes on in my work than me. And I think when compliance shows that vulnerability, it's like, wow, they get it.
Yeah. I'm in this with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you. That could be, I guess, the subtitle of the book. I'm in this with you.
Yeah.
And then how do we show them that we're in this with them? And that's the point of the different chapters, is to try to show techniques to let that happen.
Well, speaking of chapters, toward the end, and this is just one thing, I'm glad you're here because you can help clarify this for me. When you tell them, someone on your commercial team, the specific way in which they are expected to be a good and ethical person, and then they act in a way that is contrary to your statement, they have to override their own image of themselves. Can you explain a little bit more what you mean by that?
Yeah, so that comes out of the context of nearly every person believes him or herself to be a good person.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing. You ask, terrorists and people, why did you do it? Well, I'm a good person, and I did it because I'm a good person, and this was my beliefs, right? So nearly everyone self-identifies as being a good and ethical person. And when I tell you that I believe you are an ethical person, the first thing that happens is you're more likely to live up to that belief and that expectation. People tend to live up to the expectations you give them, good or bad. So the first thing is to tell them that they are good and ethical. Now, that suggestion takes it one step further. if I tell you, I know you're a good and ethical person, and you would never, and so I know you would never cheat on this examination. I know you would never fudge your sales goals and mess up your expenses to get more money. If the person then cheats on their expenses,
Right.
not only have they disappointed my expectations, but they've had to get over the idea that they are no longer a good and ethical person
Right.
in the way I told them they were.
Okay.
So it's kind of a double way of helping people to do the right thing. By telling them that they are a good and ethical person and how they are a good and ethical person, they are very unlikely to override that and then still believe themselves to be good and ethical. So it's a
Interesting.
very interesting technique and one I enjoy.
Sort of like a behavioral deterrent.
Absolutely a behavioral deterrent. And it makes people proud of themselves for doing the right thing and happy to live up to the expectations of what's usually a perceived authority. Compliance is an authority. I'm living up to that authority in an ethical way.
Sort of taking that little extra pause before you make a decision.
There you are.
Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for spending some time today.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
We'll see you.